was just wondering if this tie clashes with this coat. You know, you gotta, unless your name's Ricky, Gary, Larry, or Terry, or John, you gotta wear your best Sunday go-to-meeting clothes on Easter.
Well, hey, honey, I've already got the recorder on.
Well, just go with it then. Let me apologize to Ricky. He could be wearing a new leather jacket that he got from one of those stores he goes to, you know. Hey, we're talking about Easter, breaking the box today. And I've got a lot of ground to cover, but first, real quick, this. We got one of our prayer cloths come back from K. Farmer, 301 South Heritage Parkway in Sherman. And I don't know what was wrong with it. The post office sent it back. If you want to give us your correct address, either by a comment on Facebook or at Phil211 at skybest.com, then you can do that and we will send you another one. We'll address it ourselves, put our own stamp on there, and send you a prayer cloth. God has not forgotten you, and we have prayed and we're believing for you, Sister Kay. So today we're in Matthew chapter 28. The name of the message is Easter, Breaking the Box. Now as we get into this, we're going to talk about how so much of our reasoning and the things we think about and with our minds and even in our hearts sometimes, the way we emote, are all contained inside a little box. But I want you to know right now, as we get into this, we're going to talk about the last 7 words just for a minute. We're going to talk about Gethsemane and all that. But listen to me. The resurrection really happened. Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene. We're going to see that in just a moment. To other women, you have no idea how many. You're going to be startled if you've never looked into Scripture yourself. To Peter by himself, to 10 disciples, and to the 11, including Thomas later, and at his ascension, to the disciples on the Emmaus Road, appeared to them also in Galilee. Remember, Jesus had fish already cooking when they found him at the Sea of Galilee, and he restored Peter. To 500 people at one time and taught them. To James and the apostles, and to Paul on the road to Damascus. And he's still appearing as the resurrected Jesus to many people around the world today. Probably last night. Probably today as people are sleeping. And then they just wake up and he's there. He's not relegated to having to sit on a throne in heaven like some people think he is. Just seated at the right hand of the Father just means this. He has all authority, and that's what it says right here in Matthew. All authority is given unto him in heaven and earth. And that right hand thing just represents the fact that he has all authority. Now, did you realize the resurrection was so well attested to? All these Gospels and Paul's writings were finished now. These days, modern archaeologists and modern scholarship tells us they were all finished by 80 A.D. What does that mean? If there was no veracity or no truthfulness to this, if people were just telling lies about Jesus, it would have been easily refutable. If I started telling you stuff about FDR, and I said, well, you know, the man actually served 3 terms and started a 4th as the president, and you would say, oh no, presidents aren't allowed to have more than 2 terms. Well, you could easily check that in history, and we're farther than 40 years, 50 years away from the time of FDR. We're, 70 years away from FDR now? And that would be easily verifiable, and you could tell somebody, oh, Don Robertson is so wrong. How could he say something so wrong? Well, the Gospels were all finished within 50 years of Jesus' death and resurrection, and people found them irrefutable. Tiberius, the emperor of Rome, looked into this stuff, and he even wanted his Senate in Rome to vote to name Jesus as a god. A god, because Rome had a lot of gods, and they wouldn't do it. Do you know the reason why they wouldn't do it? Because they said, and sometime I'll give you the reference for this, the exact page and everything else. They said, well, if he's risen from the dead, then we can't name him a god because we can only name gods after they're already dead. The Caesars themselves weren't really considered to be gods until after they were dead. Maybe that's where the Roman Catholic Church got the stuff about not calling somebody a saint until after they're dead. I really don't know. Getting out of the box too quick here. Well, here we are in Matthew chapter 28. Now, after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week began to dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb. Well, how many women were actually there? Well, the other Mary here just says the other Mary in Matthew. Mark tells us it was the mother of Jesus. And then Mark tells us there was actually another woman there named Salome. And then there was actually another woman there named Joanna. All at this first showing here where Jesus was first raised. And then it says this, and the other women. How many women were there? I'm going to tell you there were at least 8 or 10. As they go there to put spices on Jesus' body, to wrap him up, unwrap him, and then rewrap him and wash him again because they couldn't do it. They didn't have enough time before it was going to be Passover, Shabbat, Passover, Sabbath, which was a very special Sabbath. And so they have to come the day after Sabbath, the first day of the week, which they didn't call Sunday. We get that from the Romans, and we get Easter, the name, from the Romans too. It was actually at the time of Passover, which is going to be in another month, and we'll talk about that then. But these women, there was a bunch of them. And you know what? They saw more than one angel. Let me read it to you right here. In verse 2 of Matthew 28, and behold, there was a great earthquake. For an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it. Just imagine that. This angel, this tomb is hewn in stone, out of solid stone. Nobody's ever been laid in it. It's a rich man's tomb. Poor people, they're not even supposed to be in that area. And now the tomb is guarded by a guard, soldiers. And this angel moves this stone. It says here that his face was like lightning. In other words, you couldn't even look at it. It was so bright it would blind you. And his clothing was white as snow. And the guards, it says, shook for fear of him and became like dead men. Can't you just see these guards trembling and shaking? Maybe their soldier helmet falls off. They're shaking so hard and rolls across the ground. And this angel's moving it, moves the stone, and then he just sits up there and looks at them. I dare you to do something, guards. Of course they're shaking and trembling in fear. And the guards shook, but the women answered. But the angel answered and said to the women, do not be afraid. Yeah, that's easy for angels to say when they're looking like lightning and the guards are shaking. And he says to the angel, do not be afraid, to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He is risen, as he said. Come see the place where the Lord lay. And tell his disciples in verse 7 that he is risen from the dead, and indeed he's going before you into Galilee. Now, he is not here. He is risen just as he said. He always does what he says. He never does not do what he says. But how many angels were there? Now, go back to those women for just a moment. Think about it. There's at least 8 women. Probably more. 4 of them are named. Now, just imagine with me that they're like women for today. And do you think they left that tomb after they saw that angel outside? There was 2 more inside, one at the head where Jesus' head was, one at the feet where Jesus' feet were, and then 2 of them appear like men dressed in white. There's at least 5 angels that we're told about right there. Don't you think that if suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of heavenly hosts, I said angel too, a multitude of heavenly hosts praising God and saying, glory to God in the highest, on earth peace, goodwill towards men. If that happened at his birth, my goodness, he's just gone and conquered the devil. He's in the process of taking he's already done it. He's taking the keys of death and hell. He's paraded the devil through heaven where all the angels can see. He has stripped the devil of all of his power of death and everything. And don't you think there's a multitude here at this grave? This empty grave? And now here's these women. You think they they saw all this? One of them is told to go and tell his disciples, Mary Magdalene, I think. And do you think all these other women just kept their mouths shut all day long after they came away from that tomb? Do you think, Ruth might have said to Naomi, or Joanna might have said to Ruth, or to one of the other women and one of the other her mother-in-law, or mother, her daughter, or whatever, hey, you can't believe what just happened to us. We went to the tomb of Jesus. We were going to do the things that we're supposed to do, that we needed to do as Shabbat was coming, as Sabbath was, or the Passover was coming to an end, and we had to do before Shabbat, and we couldn't get it done, so we went to do it this morning. Oh my gosh, you can't believe what happened while we were there. And then they tell that woman, and this woman, and that woman, and this sister, and that niece, and that, and just goes on and on and on and on. Hey, there's some good kinds of gossip, you know. Not all gossip is bad. And so, boy, I'm telling you, by the time Pentecost came around, now those men disciples, they might have all been in fear in that upper room and meeting there and not wanting the leaders who crucified Jesus to come after them. But I guarantee you these women were talking. By the time Pentecost comes around, boy, there's been a buzz going around in Jerusalem for a long, long time. For at least 50 days. And there's a lot of angels. Not just 5. I can guarantee you that too. Come on, get out of that box with me. If you can't hold Jesus in a tomb that's been hewn out of stone and sealed with a big rolling stone and an angel's there and guards guarding the tomb, if all of a sudden he just, boom, he's gone, you can't hold him in any box of your mind. You couldn't hold him in that tomb. Boy, I tell you, why don't you let him break out of whatever you've learned about him about as far as your traditions go. Now, as they went out, they obeyed, they went quickly. He comes in verse 16 as the 11 disciples are there, and 17, they begin to worship him, and then he says, all authority has been given to me in heaven and in earth. Now, you know, he wasn't raised just for a day or two. He was raised ever since then. And then he says in verse 20, I am with you always, even till the end of all the ages. The aeon. Eon is the word there, and it basically means this, forever and ever. No, he's raised forever. He's never going back to the cross. He's never going back to Gethsemane. He's never going to be in a tomb again. All authority is his for now and for as long as you live and way past the life on this earth. He's not just risen for a little while. Boy, wouldn't it be nice if we heard one of the politicians talk about ISIS today, and what are you going to do about the Muslims, and what are you going to do about Islam, what are you going to do about ISIS? And one of them says, well, you know what, I really haven't consulted the way I want to with the authority, the one that has all the authority. I haven't really gotten down on my knees yet and prayed and said, okay, now what do I do about this, instead of just coming off their cuff and saying, well, I will do this and I will do that. Well, think about some of the boxes here that maybe all of us need to break out of. Talking about, you know, Jesus commending his Spirit into the Father's hands. Well, what about heaven? I talked to a lady just the other day about one of her experiences in heaven, and we were there at a board meeting, and she was telling us about it, and we were just like, oh, yeah. And then there was, you know, I remember a couple of times I've been taken up there. One of the times I could only see Jesus' feet. And I'm wondering, well, why can't I see all of Jesus? And I'm looking at the gold on the road in heaven, and I'm thinking, that's not like I thought it was supposed to be. And I could see right through it and see down into it for several feet, but I knew it was a street of gold, but it doesn't look like gold. And then I got over in the book of Revelation, and I realized I had a box about what I thought the streets of heaven were about. And there it says they're made of gold that is clear as clear glass. Totally transparent. We have so many boxes. I remember a guy named Mark Ely who I just loved dearly, and the Lord told me to speak life over him. He was dying of cancer, and so I did, and I spoke life over him. And then he got suddenly better, and we went out to eat, and he started eating, and then all of a sudden he was really sick again, and then I went back and prayed with him some more, and then he got better again, and then all of a sudden I hear from his church folks and one of his elders that Mark passed away today, and a couple of months later, and I'm thinking, Lord, why? Why did Mark pass away? And then the next thing you know, suddenly I have this open vision of Mark riding a motorcycle. He loved motorcycles in heaven. Of course, it wasn't fossil fueled. And I said, well, Lord, why? And I realized Mark was having a great time. And Mark turned around and pointed at one of the saddlebags and said, there's stuff in this saddlebag that's in the saddlebag of my real motorcycle back on earth that some people need to see. And the Lord told me very plainly, he said, Mark didn't want to stay anymore. He'd got a glimpse of heaven, And he had to just keep on going and be here. What about the Passover box? Do you know that Passover can happen at any day of the week? It can be on Tuesday, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. It doesn't have to happen on the day that we think it has to happen. When the full moon comes and when the crops are where they're supposed to be, with the right things being right, that's when Passover comes. And we think, oh, it had to be on such and such a day in order for the 3 days to work out that Jesus had to be in the tomb. No, it doesn't. You can't make Passover be on Thursday every year. The sun was darkened when Jesus was on the cross. Listen to me. He bled out. He bled out. He passed blood under so much intense pressure in the Garden of Gethsemane, the place of pressing, where olive oil is pressed out of the olives, that he sweat great drops of blood. Then he was beaten. Then he had blood flowing down his face from the crown of thorns. Then he was whipped with all cat o' nine tails. How terrible is that? Then he couldn't even manage to carry his own cross. Simon the Cyrene had to carry it. Then he got up there. They nailed his hands, nailed his feet, probably right here on the wrist. And he actually probably bled out. Dead. Bled out. When he was on the cross, the sun was darkened. Do you know what God was saying? He was saying, my son's the light of the world, not that orb up there. Imagine those women in Israel that day. They're trying to get ready for Passover Sabbath. And all of a sudden, everything is dark. Oh my gosh, we're not ready yet. Our husbands aren't home yet. And God was saying, hey, that Jesus, he is your Sabbath. He's the way to get to me. He's the way to communicate with me. He's the Passover lamb that brings you all the deliverance. Did you know John 13 all the way through 17 was spoken at the Last Supper? Well, I'm running out of time, so we've got to close this off, and we'll get into the other things where we need to break out of the box sometimes later. But get out of your Easter box. If you're going to Easter and they're only talking about the resurrection on Easter Sunday, and the next week that's sick, sorry, and sober, broke, disgusted, and sad, started following Jesus. Or, the great, lost all that I had, the great by and by, but things are so bad here on earth. Resurrection power is for you today. God will meet your need today. God will give you peace today. He'll give you joy today. Man, after they got done being scared about, Jesus appearing from the dead, they got real happy. And we're supposed to have Easter every Sunday and every day of our lives. Resurrection power flowing through us. God bless you. We love you. Get out of the box concerning Easter.